If you walk down that aisle tomorrow, don't ever call this house again." She said it low, through her teeth, her fingers wrapped around my wrist like a warning. The rehearsal dinner table went completely silent. Aunts froze mid-bite. Cousins suddenly found something very interesting on their plates. Across the table, Daniel was laughing at something my uncle had just said. He had no idea what had just happened 2 feet away from him. That was the last night I ate at my parents' table for a long time. My name is Valentina. I'm 38 years old, and I grew up in San Antonio, the eldest daughter of 2 immigrants who built a small catering business from nothing but hard work, borrowed equipment, and an almost frightening amount of pride. My parents sacrificed genuinely and deeply, and I never once took that for granted. But sacrifice in our house came with conditions. It came with an unspoken contract. We give you everything, and in return, you become what we need you to be. What they needed me to be was someone who married well. And, well, had a very specific definition: money, status, the right last name, someone who made the family look good at Sunday dinner. Daniel was a high school art teacher. He drove a 2009 Honda with a cracked dashboard. He had no family wealth, no investment portfolio, no property. What he had was steadiness, honesty so consistent it sometimes startled me, and a way of listening that made you feel like the most important person in the room. I was a hospital billing coordinator at the time. Not glamorous, not high-earning, but I was good at it, and it was mine. My younger sister, Elena, was the one they always talked about. Business degree, polished boyfriend, a life that looked exactly the way my parents had drawn it up in their heads. Elena moved through the world in a way that made my parents stand taller. I moved through it in a way that apparently made them nervous. I was the quieter one, the one who followed her heart instead of their blueprint. And, for a long time, I thought that made me lesser in their eyes. But I had something they never counted on, and it was about to change everything. If you've ever loved someone your family didn't approve of, you already know that feeling. That specific weight in your chest that sits somewhere between guilt and certainty. You've probably been called too soft, too naive, too willing to throw your future away for someone who doesn't fit the picture. I know that feeling from the inside. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. These are real experiences told honestly for people who need to hear them. And I want to ask you something before we go further. Have you ever had to choose between family approval and your own happiness? Drop your answer in the comments, I read them. And if this already sounds familiar to you, go ahead and click like right now. The wedding was small. A community garden that Daniel's old mentor donated for the day. Folding chairs, string lights, tamales Daniel's coworker made from scratch. My best friend cried during the vows. Daniel cried. I cried. It was exactly what I wanted. My parents didn't show. I told myself I'd expected it. I told myself it was fine. But when the officiant asked who was there to support us and I looked out at those folding chairs, I felt their absence like a sound you can't unhear. 1 week after the wedding, I called my mother. I thought maybe the anger had cooled. She answered, listened for approximately 10 seconds, then said flatly, "You made your choice. We made ours." The line went dead. I drove to my childhood home. My father answered the door and looked at me the way you look at someone trying to sell you something you don't want. "We don't need to do this," he said, already moving to close the door. But I saw the hallway behind him. Boxes. My things. My childhood photos, spelling bee ribbons, my quinceañera dress folded into a trash bag, all of it stacked and waiting. Elena appeared at the top of the stairs, arms crossed. She looked at me and said nothing. She didn't come down. I picked up the boxes. I didn't cry until I got to the car. Then I sat in the driveway of the house I grew up in and let it happen, quietly, with the boxes in the back seat. 2 days later, a letter arrived, hand-delivered, from my parents' attorney. They had formally removed me as a beneficiary from their estate, and they had dissolved a small college savings bond that was still technically in my name. Around $14,000, gone, with paperwork. They didn't just cut me off emotionally, they made it official on paper. Daniel found me on the kitchen floor that night, the letter in my lap. He didn't say anything wise or comforting, he just sat down next to me, shoulder to shoulder, on the floor, and that was enough. I told myself the worst had already happened. I was wrong. My family was only getting started. 3 months after the wedding, my parents threw a 35th anniversary party, the whole extended family. Cousins I grew up playing with, aunts and uncles from 2 states over. I found out through a cousin's Instagram post. A photo of my sister Elena giving a toast holding a glass up, my parents glowing beside her like she was everything. I screenshotted the post, put my phone face down on the counter. I didn't cry that time. I just felt numb. The way you do when you've been cold for so long that you stop expecting warmth. A few weeks later, I was invited to a baby shower by a close family friend, not through my parents, directly by the friend herself. I went because I loved her and I refused to disappear from every room they'd ever been in. In the kitchen, I heard two aunts talking in low voices, the kind of low that still carries. My mother had apparently told people. Valentina abandoned the family for a man with nothing. She was always ungrateful. I walked into that kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, looked at both of them without blinking and said calmly, "I can hear you." Then I walked back out. On the drive home, I told Daniel. He was furious in that quiet, jaw-tight way he gets. I talked him down, and somewhere in the middle of that conversation, I noticed something shifting inside me. Not hardening exactly, more like settling, like something soft becoming load-bearing. Then Elena called. Her voice was warm, sisterly, almost sweet. She said our parents were struggling, that maybe I should come back and apologize, keep the peace. I asked what I'd be apologizing for. She went quiet. Then, for making them look bad. I knew immediately this call hadn't been her idea. I told her, when Mom and Dad want to talk to me like a daughter and not a disappointment, they know my number. I hung up. That night, I started a journal. Not a feelings journal. A record. Dates. Exact words. Who was present, what was said. I just wanted to remember clearly, because I knew someday I'd need to. What none of them knew was that something had been quietly growing in the background the entire time. Years before I met Daniel, I had started a blog. Nothing polished, just honest, plain language breakdowns of hospital billing errors, insurance traps, and how ordinary people could fight back against a system designed to confuse them. I wrote under a pen name. I wrote late at night, after long shifts, mostly because I was angry about what I saw at work every day and needed somewhere to put it. By the second year of our marriage, that blog had over 60,000 monthly readers. A healthcare advocacy nonprofit found me, reached out, and offered me a consulting contract. Remote, flexible, and paying more than my full-time hospital job. I left the billing office quietly, told almost no one except Daniel and one close friend. My parents didn't know. Elena didn't know. Not a single aunt or cousin or family friend knew. What they didn't know was that while they were busy writing me off, something I built in the quiet just for myself had started to grow into something they never could have predicted. The consulting work eventually pulled me into a specific professional circle: healthcare advocacy, nonprofit funding, patient rights, a world I had built my way into through years of invisible effort. And that world, as it turned out, was not as far from my family's world as I had assumed. I never planned for our paths to cross again the way they did. But life has a way of setting the table, and eventually, everyone gets their seat. Around this time, someone reached out to me that I didn't expect. Mr. Carreño. He'd been the family attorney for my parents' catering business for over 20 years, semi-retired. The kind of man who wore the same wool blazer in every season and remembered everyone's birthday without writing it down. He contacted me on his own, not at my parents' request. He'd heard what happened and felt, in his words, that things had been handled improperly. Specifically, the legal letter. The dissolved bond. We met for coffee. He told me quietly, hands folded around his cup, that the bond in question had originally been set up with my grandfather's name on it, my late abuelo, and there were questions. Real, legal questions. About whether my parents had full authority to dissolve it on their own. He wasn't promising anything. He was watching, and he wanted me to know he was on my side. I didn't pursue it, not then, but I held it. Meanwhile, cracks were forming in the family picture they'd worked so hard to maintain. Elena's 4-year relationship ended abruptly. Her fiancé broke off the engagement with no public explanation. My parents' catering business lost 2 major contracts after a health inspection report made its way on mine. I heard all of this secondhand. I didn't call. I didn't gloat. I just listened when people told me and then let it go. But I did make one quiet move. Through my consulting network, I discovered that a medical advocacy nonprofit my parents had been courting for a major catering contract with the same organization I had been consulting for. I said nothing to anyone, not even Daniel first. He told me one evening, "You don't have to do anything, what you've built speaks for itself." I nodded. But the look on my face must have told him something because he watched me for a moment longer than usual. I already knew what was coming. I was going to let it arrive on its own. The nonprofit held its annual donor appreciation luncheon at a downtown event space, the kind of room with high ceilings and long white tables and the smell of fresh coffee and catered food drifting in from the side doors. I was there as a featured consultant. I had been asked to speak. My name was in the printed program. My parents' catering company had won the contract to work the event 3 months earlier. Neither side knew the other would be there until the morning of the luncheon. I saw my mother see me from across the room. She stopped walking. A serving tray tilted slightly in her hands. Just enough to notice, she steadied it. Our eyes met for 1 second, and then I looked away. The nonprofit's director introduced me warmly, publicly, in front of everyone in that room. My name, my work, the number of patients whose billing appeals had been supported through resources my consulting helped build. Applause. Real, genuine applause from people who had no idea what was happening 2 tables over. I stood. I thanked the room. I made eye contact with my mother once, briefly, the way you'd acknowledge a stranger, and then I gave my remarks without a single tremor in my voice. During the break, my father appeared near the water station. His voice was low. Valentina, we didn't know you'd be here. I said, I know. He started, your mother and I have been thinking, Dad. I said it quietly, not unkindly, but with a firmness I'd been building for 2 years. Not here, not like this. Elena was across the room helping with the setup, close enough to watch the whole exchange. She didn't move toward us. The nonprofit director had been nearby. She leaned over to a board member and quietly asked who those people were. The board member explained they were the catering staff, and apparently Valentina's estranged family. The director's expression shifted in a way that required no words. Later, she pulled me aside privately. She mentioned, professionally and carefully, that the catering contract coming up for renewal next year was something she'd like my input on, as a consultant. Not as a family member. I understood exactly what she meant. I nodded, said I'd be happy to help. Then I walked to the restroom, stood over the sink, gripped the cold porcelain edge, and exhaled for the first time all afternoon. I didn't plan that moment, but I'll be honest, I didn't feel sorry about it either. For the first time, they saw me the way the rest of the world had been seeing me for years. 6 weeks after the luncheon, my parents showed up at our home on a Sunday morning. Unannounced, my father was holding his hat in his hands, the way men from his generation hold hats when they don't know what to do with themselves. My mother's eyes were red and swollen in a way I hadn't seen since her own mother's funeral. They asked to come in. I let them. But I didn't rush to the door. We sat in the living room. Daniel made coffee and then gave us space. The conversation was hard in the way that honest things are hard. My mother apologized, haltingly, searching for words that didn't quite come in the right order. My father mostly looked at the floor. He's always been a man who leads with silence. I listened to all of it. I didn't cry. I didn't reach across and tell them it was fine because it wasn't, not yet. What I told them was, I need you to understand what you did. Not just apologize for how it ended up. The catering business was struggling. Elena was living at home again. The polished image they had spent years curating had largely come apart quietly, the way things do when they were held together more by appearance than by anything solid. I didn't offer money. I didn't offer to use my consulting connections to save their business. What I offered was smaller than that, and maybe more valuable. A door. Left open, 1 inch. They came back because the world humbled them. But I stayed standing because I never let them break me, even when I almost let myself believe they could. If your family ever made you feel like love was only valid if it came with the right bank account, this story was for you. Drop a heart in the comments if you ever had to choose between your family's approval and your own happiness. And share this with someone who needed to hear that walking away from their approval is not the same as walking away from your strength. Click like to help this story reach the people who need it most. Every week on this channel, we tell the stories that don't get told anywhere else. The ones about ordinary people who were counted out, written off, and quietly proved everyone wrong. If that's the kind of story you need right now, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss one. We'll see you in the next one, and until then, keep standing.